Her daughter needed blood, but the only match was the billionaire who broke her heart. "You need to call him, Brielle." Dr. Winters's voice was gentle but firm. "He's the only viable match we've found." Brielle Hartley stared at the blood compatibility report in her trembling hands, the medical terminology blurring through her tears. Call him. As if it were that simple. As if she could just pick up the phone and speak to Colson Hayes after 8 years of silence. 8 years of deliberately building a life that had no room for him. "I can't," her voice cracked. "You don't understand what you're asking me to do." Welcome back to Cedar Drama. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who subscribes, likes, comments, and shares these stories. Your love and support fuels my passion for bringing you these powerful tales that touch the soul. Today's story will test everything you believe about pride, forgiveness, and the lengths we'll go to protect those we love. And I'm warning you now, if you're not ready for a story that will completely shatter your heart before rebuilding it, maybe skip this one. But if you want to feel something real, if you're brave enough to face a story about impossible choices and devastating truths, then stay with me. Watch till the end and rate it from 0 to 100, because what you're about to witness will change how you think about second chances forever. Now, let's get back to the story. Dr. Winters leaned forward, her dark eyes compassionate but unyielding. "I understand that your daughter has a rare blood disorder. I understand that without regular transfusions from a compatible donor, Sinclair will face life-threatening complications within weeks. So whatever happened between you and this man, whatever hurt he caused you, it doesn't matter anymore. Only she matters." Through the window of the consultation room, Brielle could see her daughter in the pediatric ward, her small body dwarfed by the hospital bed, her olive skin pale against the white sheets. Sinclair was drawing something, her dark curls falling across her face, completely unaware that her mother was falling apart in the next room. "He doesn't even know she exists," Brielle whispered. "How do I call him after all this time and tell him he has a daughter? And that she's dying? The same way you do everything else," Dr. Winters said quietly. "With courage. Because you don't have another choice." It was supposed to be an ordinary Wednesday morning. Brielle had been in her Portland design studio reviewing fabric samples for a downtown hotel renovation when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Sinclair's school, Ridgemont Academy, and something in her chest tightened with primal maternal instinct. "Miss Hartley, this is Nurse Patterson from Ridgemont." Sinclair collapsed during PE class. "She's conscious, but we've called an ambulance. They're taking her to Children's Medical Center." The fabric samples scattered across her desk as Brielle grabbed her keys, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sinclair had been tired lately, sleeping more than usual, but what 8-year-old wasn't exhausted by the end of a school day? She'd been bruising easily too, strange purple marks appearing on her arms and legs. Brielle had scheduled a pediatrician appointment for next week, thinking maybe it was anemia, maybe she needed more iron in her diet. She'd had no idea she was watching her daughter die in slow motion. The emergency room at Children's Medical Center was controlled chaos. Brielle burst through the automatic doors, her breath coming in short gasps, her vision tunneling. "My daughter, Sinclair Hartley, 8 years old. They brought her in by ambulance. Room 7, the nurse said gently, something in her expression making Brielle's blood run cold. Dr. Winters is with her now." Brielle found her daughter surrounded by machines, wires connecting Sinclair's small body to monitors that beeped with urgent rhythm. Her baby girl looked impossibly fragile, her dark curls tangled against the pillow, her green eyes, Colson's eyes, clouded with confusion and fear. "Mommy," Sinclair's voice was barely a whisper. "I got dizzy and everything went spotty." "Am I sick?" Brielle took her daughter's hand, forcing her voice to remain steady even as terror clawed at her throat. "The doctors are going to figure it out, baby. You're going to be fine." But she wasn't fine. Over the next 4 hours, Brielle watched as they drew blood, performed imaging, asked questions about symptoms she'd dismissed as normal childhood complaints. Sinclair was brave through it all, making jokes with the technicians, asking curious questions about the machines, her brilliant mind hungry for understanding even in crisis. She gets that from her father, Brielle thought, then violently pushed the thought away. She'd gotten very good at not thinking about Colson Hayes over the years. very good at pretending that the man who'd shattered her heart into a million pieces didn't still own every single fragment. Miss Hartley. Dr. Lydia Winters found her in the family waiting room at 10 p.m., a tablet in her hands and exhaustion in her eyes. We have the preliminary results. We need to talk. Brielle set down her cold coffee, her hands trembling. Just tell me straight. I can handle it. Dr. Winters sat down beside her, and in that moment, Brielle knew. The way doctors sit when they're about to destroy your world is different from how they sit when they're delivering good news. Sinclair has a rare blood disorder called Glanzmann's thrombasthenia. It's a platelet function disorder that severely impacts her blood's ability to clot. Combined with what appears to be developing immune thrombocytopenia, her platelet counts are critically low. She's at extreme risk for internal bleeding, hemorrhage, and life-threatening complications. The words hit like physical blows. But she's only 8. How is this possible? Why didn't we see this sooner? These disorders can be subtle at first. Children compensate. The bruising you mentioned, the fatigue, those were early signs, but we're at a critical point now. Any injury, even minor, could be catastrophic. What does that mean? What are our options? Brielle heard her voice coming from somewhere far away, clinical and detached, as if this were happening to someone else's child. We'll start platelet transfusions immediately to stabilize her, but that's temporary, a bridge, not a solution. Sinclair needs regular transfusions from a compatible donor. Her blood type is extremely rare, AB negative with additional antibodies that make matching nearly impossible. Without consistent transfusions from a highly compatible donor, her prognosis is... Dr. Winters paused, choosing her words carefully. 6 to 8 weeks of stability at best. After that, the complications become increasingly severe. The world tilted. Brielle gripped the arms of her chair, fighting the urge to vomit. Then we find a donor. We get her on the registry. We search everywhere. We've already started that process, but Miss Hartley, you need to understand. Finding an unrelated donor with her specific compatibility requirements could take months or years. And even then, repeated transfusions from different donors can cause additional complications. The best outcomes come from a single, highly compatible biological relative who can donate regularly. I already know I'm not compatible, Brielle said, her voice hollow. We did genetic testing when she was born because of my family history. Different blood types, different factors. What about Sinclair's father? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Brielle closed her eyes, and suddenly she was 26 again, standing in the doorway of that Seattle hotel room, watching the man she loved with his arms around another woman, watching her entire future crumble. Colson Hayes, tech billionaire, innovator. The man who'd made her believe in fairy tales before crushing them under his handmade Italian shoes. The man who'd never known he had a daughter because Brielle had been too proud and too hurt to tell him. Miss Hartley. Dr. Winters's voice pulled her back to the present. I understand family situations can be complicated. You don't understand. Brielle's voice was sharper than she intended. He doesn't even know she exists. Dr. Winters's eyebrows rose slightly, but her voice remained professional. That does complicate things. But Miss Hartley, we're talking about your daughter's life. If there's any chance he's compatible, we need to test him, soon. Later that night, alone in Sinclair's room, Brielle watched her daughter sleep. The transfusion bag dripped slowly, feeding Sinclair the platelets her body desperately needed. She looked so small, so vulnerable, hooked up to all those tubes and wires. Her dark curls spread across the pillow, her face, even in sleep, showing traces of the man Brielle had spent 8 years trying to forget. Mommy. Sinclair's voice was soft, groggy from medication. Are you crying? Brielle quickly wiped her eyes. No, sweetheart, just tired. Me too. Sinclair's hand found hers, small fingers wrapping around Brielle's thumb the way they had when she was a newborn. Mommy, am I really sick? Like, really, really sick? Brielle smoothed Sinclair's dark curls away from her face. Yes, baby. But we're going to fix it. Promise? The word was a knife to her heart. I promise. Sinclair smiled sleepily, her green eyes. Colson's eyes, already closing again. Okay, I trust you, Mommy. You always fix everything. As Sinclair drifted back to sleep, Brielle pulled out her phone with trembling hands. She'd kept his number all these years, though she couldn't articulate why. It was saved under simply C, as if even typing his full name would give him too much power over her battered heart. Colson Hayes, the man who'd taught her what passion felt like, who'd made her believe in love at first sight when he'd walked into that Portland Tech conference to speak about biomedical innovation, who'd pursued her with an intensity that had been both thrilling and terrifying. The man whose daughter was fighting for her life 3 feet away from her. Brielle stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Every rational part of her brain screamed at her to make the call, but the broken heart that still lived in her chest whispered all the reasons why she couldn't. He'd called what they had a distraction. A pleasant distraction. She'd heard him say it to that woman, Juliet. Heard him laughing about how Brielle had actually thought they had a future together. But then Sinclair shifted in her sleep, and the monitor beeped, and Brielle knew she didn't have a choice. Her pride, her pain, her shattered heart, none of it mattered compared to Sinclair's life. Her finger hovered over the call button. She pressed it. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Maybe he'd changed his number. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe she'd get a reprieve from this impossible conversation. Hayes. His voice, deep and crisp with the faint hint of East Coast education, sent electricity shooting through her nervous system. One word, and she was transported back to every whispered confession, every passionate argument, every moment of pure joy she'd felt in his arms. Colson. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. The silence that followed felt eternal. She could hear him breathing, could almost feel his shock through the phone. Brielle. His voice was stunned, disbelieving. Is this really you? After all this time, I need to see you. The words came out in a rush. I wouldn't call if it wasn't. If it wasn't. If it wasn't what? His voice had shifted now, concern bleeding through the shock. Are you okay? Are you hurt? It's not about me, Colson. It's about your daughter. The silence this time was deafening. She could hear the exact moment he stopped breathing. My what? His voice was barely audible. Sinclair. She's 8 years old, and she has a rare blood disorder. Her platelets are failing, and she needs regular transfusions from a compatible donor, and according to the doctors, you might be her only chance. The silence stretched so long that Brielle thought the call had dropped. Then she heard a sound that might have been a sharp intake of breath or a choked sob. A daughter, he whispered, his voice breaking. I have a daughter, and you never told me. Colson, I can explain. 8 years. His voice was rising now, that familiar intensity she remembered bleeding through his carefully controlled tone. 8 years of her life, and I didn't even know she existed. How could you keep this from me? Brielle felt her own anger flare, 8 years of repressed fury rising to meet his. Don't you dare. Don't you dare make this about your wounded feelings when my baby is lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life. Our baby. He corrected, his voice raw. She's our baby, isn't she? The possessiveness in his tone made her heart clench. Yes, she's yours. What's wrong with her? What kind of sick? Tell me everything. Despite everything between them, Brielle heard genuine anguish in his voice. She explained Sinclair's condition, the platelet disorder, the urgent need for a compatible blood donor, the impossibility of finding a match through the registry. Colson listened without interrupting, and she could almost see him pacing wherever he was, his mind already racing through solutions the way it always did when faced with impossible problems. I'll be on the next flight to Portland, he said without hesitation. Text me the hospital information. Colson, you don't understand. No, you don't understand. I have a daughter who needs me. Nothing else matters. I'll be there by morning. The line went dead. Brielle stared at her phone, her hands shaking. What had she done? In less than 5 minutes, the carefully constructed life she'd built for herself and Sinclair was about to be turned upside down by the one man she'd never been able to forget. Sinclair stirred in her bed. Mommy, who were you talking to? Just a doctor, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. But sleep was impossible for Brielle. She spent the rest of the night pacing the hospital corridors. drinking terrible coffee from the vending machine and trying to prepare herself for the inevitable confrontation. How do you face the man who destroyed you? How do you stand in the same room with someone who taught you what love could be before showing you exactly how much pain it could cause? Colson Hayes didn't just arrive. He descended on Children's Medical Center like a force of nature. Brielle heard him before she saw him, his voice carrying down the corridor as he spoke rapid fire into his phone, undoubtedly rearranging his entire life with the efficiency that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in tech. Cancel the Singapore meeting. Push the board presentation to next month. I don't care what they say, Marcus. My daughter needs me. Everything else can wait. When he rounded the corner, Brielle's breath caught in her throat. 8 years had only made him more devastating. His dark hair was shorter now, touched with gray at the temples. His charcoal suit was wrinkled from the red-eye flight, but he still moved with that confident stride that had first caught her attention across a crowded conference hall. His green eyes, the same eyes Sinclair had inherited, found hers across the waiting room, and the world seemed to stop. Brielle. Colson. They stood there for a moment, drinking each other in. He looked older, more mature, the boyish enthusiasm she remembered tempered by years of responsibility. But that dangerous magnetism that had drawn her to him like a moth to flame was still there, crackling between them despite everything that had happened. Where is she? His voice was gentler now, uncertain in a way she'd never heard from him. Where's our daughter? She's sleeping. Brielle heard her voice coming from somewhere far away. We need to talk. His laugh was bitter, painful. We should have talked 8 years ago, Brielle, before you disappeared without a trace, before you robbed me of 8 years of my daughter's life. You want to do this here? In a hospital corridor? I want to do this wherever you'll finally tell me the truth. His eyes were blazing now, hurt and anger warring in those green depths. Why did you leave, Brielle? Why did you vanish like I meant nothing to you? The hurt in his voice almost broke her resolve, almost made her forget why she'd run in the first place. But then the memory crashed over her. Juliet Romano in his arms, his voice saying those terrible words. You know why I left. No, I don't. He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, cedar, and something uniquely him that made her knees weak. One day we were planning the future, talking about the company we'd build together, the innovations we'd create. The next day you were gone, no explanation, no goodbye. Just an empty apartment and a phone number that led nowhere. Brielle stared at him in disbelief. Are you serious right now? You're going to stand there and pretend you don't remember that night? Juliet's surprise visit? What I walked in on. Colson's face went pale. Juliet. What does she have to do with? His eyes widened as understanding dawned. Oh God. You saw us. I heard you too. Brielle's voice was barely controlled. I heard you tell her that what we had was just a pleasant distraction, that she was the one who really mattered. Brielle, no. You don't understand what happened. I understand perfectly. Your ex-fiancée decided she wanted you back, and you couldn't get rid of me fast enough. Colson stepped closer, his eyes intense. Is that really what you think? That I would throw away what we had for Juliet? I know what I saw, Colson. I know what I heard. Before he could respond, a small voice interrupted them. Excuse me, are you fighting about me? They both turned to see Sinclair standing in the doorway of her room, dragging her IV pole behind her. She looked impossibly small in her hospital gown, her dark curls tangled from sleep, but her green eyes, Colson's eyes, were bright with curiosity and intelligence. Colson's face went white. He dropped to his knees right there in the corridor, staring at his daughter as if she were a miracle made flesh. Sinclair, that's me. Sinclair tilted her head, studying him with the same analytical intensity Brielle had seen in Colson 1,000 times. Are you the doctor Mommy was talking to on the phone? Brielle's heart was breaking, watching them meet for the first time. Sinclair looked so much like Colson it was almost painful. The same stubborn chin, the same expressive eyes, the same way of tilting her head when processing new information. No, sweetheart. Colson's voice was thick with emotion. I'm your father. Sinclair's eyes widened. She looked from Colson to Brielle and back again. My father? But Mommy said my father lived far away and couldn't visit. I didn't know about you, Coulson said, his voice breaking. I didn't know. But I'm here now. And I'm never going to leave you again. Sinclair studied his face with the serious expression of a child solving a complex puzzle. You have my eyes. Coulson laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh Brielle had heard from him. Actually, you have mine. And your grandmother's chin. You would have loved her. Mommy, is he really my father? Sinclair looked at Brielle, seeking confirmation. Brielle knelt beside them, her heart in her throat. Yes, baby, he really is. Sinclair looked at Coulson again, then did something that made both adults freeze. She stepped forward and hugged him. Coulson's arms came around his daughter, and Brielle watched 8 years of anger and hurt crumble in his face. He buried his face in Sinclair's dark curls, and his shoulders shook with silent sobs. I'm sorry I wasn't here before, he whispered. Are you going to help me get better? Sinclair asked, pulling back to look at him. I'm going to do everything in my power, Coulson promised. Everything. Dr. Winters chose that moment to appear with a clipboard. Miss Hartley, I see we have a visitor. This is Coulson Hayes, Brielle said stiffly, Sinclair's biological father. Dr. Winters's face lit up. Perfect timing. Mr. Hayes, we'd like to run some compatibility tests as soon as possible. If you're willing. Whatever you need, Coulson said immediately. Take my blood. Run every test you have. I'll do anything. Dad. Sinclair's small voice made them all turn. She was looking at Coulson with wonder, testing out the word. Will it hurt when you give me your blood? Coulson's jaw clenched, but his voice was gentle. Maybe a little, but I promise you, any pain I feel won't compare to the joy of knowing you're going to be okay. Sinclair nodded solemnly, then brightened. Can you stay with me while they do the tests? Mommy gets scared when they take my blood, but she tries to hide it. Coulson looked at Brielle, and for a moment, the years of hurt fell away. They were just two parents terrified for their child. If your mommy says it's okay, Brielle wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to keep him at arm's length. But looking at Sinclair's hopeful face, she found herself nodding. He can stay. As they walked toward the lab, Sinclair slipped her small hand into Coulson's large one. Dad, will you tell me about where you live? Mommy says you work with computers and medicine. I do. Coulson's voice was full of wonder. I design technology that helps doctors treat diseases. And yes, I'll tell you all about it. Brielle watched them walk ahead of her, her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Sinclair was already chattering away, telling Coulson about school and her friends and her favorite books. And Coulson was listening with the intensity he'd once reserved for his most important projects, as if every word from his daughter's mouth was precious beyond measure. But even as her heart warmed at seeing them together, Brielle couldn't forget the conversation they'd been having before Sinclair interrupted them. Coulson's confusion about that night with Juliet had seemed genuine, but how could he not remember? How could he not remember destroying everything they'd built together? The blood test would tell them if Coulson could save Sinclair's life, but who was going to save Brielle's heart from breaking all over again? The preliminary results came back 6 hours later with news that felt like cosmic irony. Dr. Winters found Brielle and Coulson in the family waiting room, where they'd maintained an awkward distance while Sinclair napped. It's remarkable, Dr. Winters said, consulting her tablet. Mr. Hayes, you're not just compatible, you're a near-perfect match. The blood type, the antibodies, the cellular markers all align in a way we rarely see, even between parents and children. Brielle, what you're looking at is likely your daughter's best chance at survival. Coulson closed his eyes, his hand gripping the arm of his chair. When can we start the transfusions? We need to run additional tests. Make sure you're healthy enough for regular donations. Blood donation on this scale, multiple times per month, is taxing on the body. But if everything checks out, we could start the first transfusion within days. Dr. Winters paused. I want you both to understand what this means. Mr. Hayes, you'll be committing to regular donations for the foreseeable future, possibly years. This isn't a one-time procedure. This is a long-term commitment. I understand, Coulson said firmly. Do whatever tests you need. I'll sign whatever forms you have. Just tell me how to save my daughter." After Dr. Winters left, Coulson and Brielle sat in silence, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them both. The transfusions, the long-term commitment, the inevitable conversations about their future. Brielle. Coulson's voice was quiet. "About that night, about Juliet, I need you to understand what really happened." Brielle's jaw tightened. "I don't want to hear your excuses. They're not excuses, they're the truth. And Sinclair deserves to have parents who aren't carrying around 8 years of misunderstanding." Despite herself, Brielle found herself listening. Coulson leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together, his knuckles white. "Juliet came to my apartment that night without warning. She was hysterical, crying so hard she could barely breathe. She told me she'd been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer." Brielle's breath caught. Whatever she'd expected him to say, it wasn't that. She said the doctors had given her maybe a year, that she was terrified and alone. She begged me to be there for her through the treatment, not as a lover, but as a friend, someone who'd known her before the diagnosis. "So you held her," Brielle said quietly. "You comforted her." "I held her while she cried." "Yes, because despite everything that had gone wrong between us, I'd cared about her once, and she was facing her mortality at 32 years old. And you told her I was just a distraction." Coulson's face contorted with pain. "No, Brielle. I told her that letting her go had been one of the best decisions I'd ever made because it led me to you. I told her that what we'd had was pleasant while it lasted, but that you had shown me what real love felt like. I told her I couldn't be what she needed because I was completely committed to building a life with you." The words hit Brielle like a physical blow. "What?" "I told Juliet that very night that I was planning to propose to you, that I'd already bought the ring, that you weren't a rebound or a distraction. You were the woman I wanted to spend my life with." Coulson's voice broke. "And then you disappeared, and I thought I'd done something wrong. I thought maybe I'd pushed too hard or moved too fast, and I spent 2 years searching for you before I finally accepted that you didn't want to be found." Brielle stared at him, her entire world tilting on its axis. "But I heard you say." "You heard what you expected to hear," Coulson said gently. "Or maybe you heard part of a conversation and your fears filled in the rest. But Brielle, I never called you a distraction. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You still are." The silence stretched between them as Brielle processed this revelation. 8 years of anger. 8 years of believing she'd been discarded. 8 years of protecting herself from a pain that had been based on incomplete information. "The ring," she whispered. Coulson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Worn from years of being carried. I've had it with me every day since you left. I kept thinking that somehow, someday, I'd find you and get the chance to explain, to show you that what we had was real." Brielle's eyes filled with tears. "Coulson, I don't. Not yet," he said softly. "Right now, we focus on Sinclair. We get her through this. And then, if you'll let me, I'd like to try to earn your forgiveness, to prove that I'm not the man you thought I was. That I never was." Before Brielle could respond, Sinclair's voice called from her room. "Dad? Mommy? Are you still here?" Coulson immediately stood, slipping the ring box back into his pocket. Both parents moved toward their daughter's room, and Brielle followed, her mind reeling. Everything she'd believed about that night, about Coulson's feelings for her, had been wrong. She'd run from the man who'd been planning to propose to her. She'd kept his daughter from him for 8 years because of a misunderstanding. In Sinclair's room, Coulson pulled a chair close to her bed. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Tired, but also excited," Sinclair said, settling back against her pillows. "The doctor said you're a perfect match. That means you can save me, right?" "That's exactly what it means," Coulson said, taking her hand. Sinclair looked back and forth between her parents. "So, after you give me your blood, are you going to stay? Or do you have to go back to your work?" Coulson glanced at Brielle, his eyes full of questions. "I'm going to stay as long as you and your mom need me. My work can wait. You can't." Sinclair smiled, satisfied. "Good. Because I have a lot of questions about what you do. And Mommy says you're really smart, so maybe you can help me with my science project. I would love nothing more, Coulson said, his voice thick with emotion. As visiting hours ended and nurses came to check Sinclair's vitals, Coulson reluctantly stood to leave. I'm staying at the Westin down the street, he said to Brielle. Call me if anything changes. Anything at all. Before he left, he leaned down and kissed Sinclair's forehead. Sweet dreams, sweetheart. I'll be here first thing in the morning. Promise? Sinclair asked. I promise. And I always keep my promises. After Coulson left, Sinclair settled back with a contented sigh. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart? I like him. He feels right. Like he's supposed to be here. Brielle smoothed Sinclair's dark curls. What makes you say that? Because when he looks at you, his face does the same thing yours does when you look at him. Like you're both sad and happy at the same time. Like you lost something important and just found it again. Out of the mouths of babes, Brielle thought. You're very observant, baby. I get that from you. Sinclair yawned. And probably from him too, since you both notice everything. As Sinclair drifted off to sleep, Brielle sat in the quiet hospital room and allowed herself to really think about what Coulson had told her. About Juliet's cancer. About the proposal he'd planned. About the ring he'd carried for 8 years. Could she have been that wrong? Could pride and fear have cost her 8 years of happiness? Cost Sinclair 8 years with her father? Her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Coulson. Thank you for letting me meet her. She's extraordinary. Like her mother. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start fighting for her life. Together. Brielle stared at that last word. Together. It had been so long since she'd fought alongside someone instead of alone. So long since she'd allowed herself to need anyone. She typed back. She's extraordinary like both her parents. Thank you for coming. For being willing to do this. His response was immediate. There's nowhere else I'd be. She's my daughter. And you're. There was a long pause. Those 3 dots appearing and disappearing several times before the message finally came through. You're still the most important person in my world. You always have been. Brielle's finger hovered over the keyboard. 8 years ago, she would have known exactly what to say. But now, with so much hurt and misunderstanding between them, she didn't know how to bridge that gap. Finally, she typed. We have a lot to talk about. But you're right. Sinclair comes first. Everything else can wait. She watched the dots appear, pause, appear again. Then, everything else can wait. But Brielle, when this is over, when she's healthy and safe, I need you to know, I'm not walking away again. Not from her, and not from you. Not unless you tell me there's absolutely no chance for us. Brielle didn't respond. She couldn't. Because the truth was, she didn't know if there was a chance for them. She didn't know if 8 years of hurt could be healed. Didn't know if she could trust him with her heart again. But as she looked at Sinclair sleeping peacefully, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever happened between her and Coulson, they would always be connected through this brave, brilliant little girl. And maybe that was enough to start with. Maybe love didn't have to be perfect or uncomplicated. Maybe it just had to be willing to try. The next morning brought a flurry of preparations. Coulson arrived at dawn with coffee and croissants from Sinclair's favorite bakery. How did you know? Brielle asked as he handed her a vanilla latte, made exactly the way she used to take it. I asked the nurse what Sinclair's favorite breakfast was, Coulson said, and I remembered how you take your coffee. Some things you don't forget. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Coulson would arrive early, bringing breakfast. They'd sit with Sinclair through medical procedures, distracting her with stories and games. In the evenings, after Sinclair fell asleep, they'd talk, really talk. For the first time in 8 years. Tell me about her, Coulson said one night. Tell me everything I missed. So Brielle did. She told him about Sinclair's birth, how she'd come 3 weeks early during a thunderstorm. About her first words, which had been light, not mama. About how she'd taught herself to read at 4 by studying street signs and cereal boxes. About her obsession with space and dinosaurs and how things worked. She sounds like she got the best parts of both of us, Coulson said, his voice full of wonder and regret. She did, Brielle agreed. She has your curiosity and intensity. And hopefully my stubbornness. Oh, she definitely has your stubbornness. Coulson laughed. She argued with Dr. Winters yesterday about the proper terminology for her condition. At 8 years old, Brielle found herself laughing too, and it felt strange and wonderful. When was the last time she'd laughed with someone who really understood her? Who got her dry humor and sharp observations? What about you? She asked. Tell me about the last 8 years. What have you been doing? Coulson's expression grew serious. Building something that doesn't matter nearly as much as I thought it did. He paused. After you left, I threw myself into work, built Hayes Biotech into what it is today. We've developed some revolutionary diagnostic tools, partnered with hospitals around the world, made more money than I know what to do with, and I've been absolutely miserable. Brielle looked at him in surprise. But you're successful. You're changing the world. Success doesn't mean anything when you're alone, Brielle. Trust me. I've had everything I thought I wanted, and all I could think about was the woman who got away. The life we should have been building together. The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. Did you? She hesitated, not sure she wanted to know the answer. Did you ever try to move on? Date other people? I tried, Coulson admitted. My friends set me up. Well-meaning colleagues introduced me to smart, accomplished women. I even dated someone for a few months about 3 years ago. Oh, Brielle hated the jealousy that sparked in her chest. It didn't work, Coulson said quietly. Because she wasn't you. No one was you. I kept comparing every conversation, every laugh, every moment to what we'd had, and nothing measured up. They sat in silence, the weight of lost years hanging between them. I'm sorry, Brielle finally said. I'm sorry I didn't give you a chance to explain. I'm sorry I kept Sinclair from you. I thought I was protecting us both, but I was just running scared. We both made mistakes. Coulson reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. But maybe we get a second chance. Maybe Sinclair's illness is terrible and unfair, but maybe it's also the universe giving us another opportunity to get it right this time. Brielle looked down at their joined hands. Do you really think we can? After everything? I think we have to try. For her. For us. For the family we should have been all along. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever let pride keep you from the truth? Have you ever run from something that scared you, only to realize later that you ran from exactly what you needed? Because what happens next in this story will show you that sometimes our biggest mistakes lead to our greatest blessings, but only if we're brave enough to face them. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when the first critical transfusion takes place. Stay tuned to Cedar Drama. The first transfusion was scheduled for Friday morning, 3 days after Coulson had walked back into their lives. 3 days that had felt like stepping into an alternate reality where the past 8 years had been erased and rewritten. Brielle stood outside Sinclair's room, watching through the window as Coulson sat beside their daughter, explaining the transfusion process in terms an 8-year-old could understand. He'd brought a children's book about the circulatory system, and Sinclair was studying the illustrations with intense concentration. So, your blood is going to go into this machine that separates out the platelets I need. And then those go into me? Sinclair asked, tracing the diagram with her finger. Exactly right, Coulson said, pride evident in his voice. You're so smart, sweetheart. Do you know what platelets do? They help my blood clot so I don't bleed too much, Sinclair recited. But mine don't work right, so I need yours until the doctors can figure out how to fix mine. That's exactly right, and I'm going to give you as many as you need for as long as you need them. Sinclair looked up at him, her green eyes so much like his. Doesn't it hurt you to have them take your blood all the time? Coulson considered his answer carefully. A little bit. But you know what hurts more? The thought of not being able to help you. So any discomfort I feel is nothing compared to knowing I can keep you safe. Brielle felt tears prick her eyes. She'd spent 8 years painting Coulson as a villain in her mind, the man who'd broken her heart and abandoned them. But watching him with Sinclair, seeing the genuine love and devotion in every word and gesture, she realized how wrong she'd been. How much her fear and pride had cost all 3 of them. Miss Hartley. Dr. Winters appeared beside her, startling her from her thoughts. Can we talk for a moment? Of course. Brielle followed the doctor to a quiet corner of the corridor. Dr. Winters's expression was serious. I wanted to give you an update on Sinclair's condition and what we're looking at long-term. The transfusions from Mr. Hayes will stabilize her, possibly for years. But I need you to understand that this isn't a cure. It's management. We'll continue searching for other treatment options, but right now, your daughter's life depends on regular transfusions from her father. How regular? Brielle asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Initially, twice a week. As her body adjusts and we find the right balance, we might be able to reduce it to once a week or even every 10 days. But Mr. Hayes will need to commit to being available on a consistent basis. This isn't something he can do remotely. He'll need to be here, in Portland, for the foreseeable future. Brielle absorbed this information. Coulson would have to uproot his entire life, move his business operations, leave everything he'd built in Seattle. Have you discussed this with him? Dr. Winters asked gently. Not yet. We've been so focused on getting through each day. You'll need to have that conversation soon. Dr. Winters paused. Miss Hartley, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of family situations. What I'm seeing between you and Mr. Hayes, that's complicated. But whatever your personal feelings, Sinclair needs you both. She needs you to find a way to work together. I know, Brielle said quietly. We're trying. Good. Because that little girl in there, she's observant. She sees everything. And she deserves to see her parents treating each other with respect and maybe even affection. After Dr. Winters left, Brielle stood alone in the corridor, her mind racing. Coulson would have to move to Portland. They would be in each other's lives constantly, co-parenting, coordinating schedules, navigating this new reality together. There would be no more distance, no more pretending he didn't exist. The door to Sinclair's room opened, and Coulson emerged, nearly running into her. Sorry. I was just coming to find you. They're ready to start. Inside the transfusion room, Sinclair lay on a specialized bed, her small arm extended. Coulson settled into the chair beside her, and a nurse began preparing both of them for the procedure. Okay, Sinclair, Nurse Matthews said with a warm smile. You're going to feel a little pinch when I insert the IV, just like before. And Mr. Hayes, same for you. Then we'll get the machine running, and you two can just relax and talk while it does its work. Can I hold Dad's other hand? Sinclair asked. Of course you can, sweetheart. Coulson extended his free hand, and Sinclair grasped it tightly. Brielle watched as they inserted the needles, watched as the machine hummed to life, watched as Coulson's blood began flowing through the tubes toward their daughter. The science of it was remarkable. The emotion of it was overwhelming. Does it hurt, Dad? Sinclair asked, studying his face. Not even a little bit, Coulson assured her. Tell me about your science project, the one you mentioned before. What are you studying? As Sinclair launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her project on the solar system, specifically focusing on the possibility of water on Mars, Brielle found herself smiling. This was what she'd denied both of them for 8 years. This easy rapport, this natural connection between father and daughter. Mommy, are you okay? Sinclair called out. You look sad. I'm not sad, baby. I'm happy. Watching you and your dad together makes me happy. Then come sit with us. Sinclair patted the edge of her bed. We're a family now. Families sit together. Brielle moved closer, perching on the edge of Sinclair's bed. Coulson caught her eye over their daughter's head, and something passed between them. An understanding. A tentative hope. The transfusion took 2 hours. 2 hours during which they talked about everything and nothing. Sinclair told Coulson about her best friend Marin, who had a pet rabbit. Coulson told Sinclair about the time he'd tried to build a robot when he was her age and accidentally set his mother's curtains on fire. Brielle found herself contributing stories too, memories of Sinclair's childhood that made Coulson's eyes shine with both joy and regret. When the procedure was finally complete, Dr. Winters came to check Sinclair's vitals. Everything looks perfect. The platelet transfer was successful. Sinclair, you should start feeling less tired in a day or two. How do you feel right now? Good, Sinclair said. Can I go home soon? Let's keep you here for observation tonight. Make sure your body is accepting the platelets well. But if everything stays stable, you can go home tomorrow." After the doctor left, Coulson stood slowly, stretching. The donation had clearly taken a toll on him, though he was trying to hide it. "You should rest," Brielle said. "You just gave a significant amount of blood." "I'm fine," Coulson insisted, but his pallor suggested otherwise. "Dad, Mommy's right," Sinclair said with the authoritative tone of a child who'd spent too much time around medical professionals. "You need to drink lots of fluids and eat protein and rest. That's what the nurse told you." Coulson smiled. "When did you get so bossy?" "I learned from the best." Sinclair grinned at Brielle. "Mommy's really good at making people take care of themselves, even when they don't want to." "She is, isn't she?" Coulson said softly, his eyes on Brielle. "Go back to your hotel," Brielle said, fighting the urge to reach out and touch him, to smooth away the exhaustion on his face. "Sleep. Eat something substantial. We'll be here when you get back." "I don't want to leave her," Coulson admitted. "She'll be asleep in an hour anyway. The transfusion always makes her tired, and you're no good to her if you collapse from exhaustion." Reluctantly, Coulson agreed. He kissed Sinclair's forehead. "I'll be back tonight. We can have dinner together." "Bring Chinese food," Sinclair requested. "The kind with the noodles I like." After Coulson left, Sinclair turned to Brielle with surprising intensity. "Mommy, why didn't you tell him about me before? Before I got sick?" Brielle had been dreading this question. She sat down carefully on the edge of Sinclair's bed. "That's complicated, sweetheart. I'm 8. I'm not a baby." Sinclair crossed her arms. "I deserve to know the truth." "You're right." Brielle took a deep breath. "When I found out I was pregnant with you, your dad and I had just had a big misunderstanding. I thought he didn't love me anymore. I thought he wanted to be with someone else. And instead of staying and asking him about it, I ran away. I was scared and hurt, and I made a bad decision." "So you were wrong? About him not loving you?" "Yes, I was very wrong. And because I was wrong, you missed out on 8 years with your dad, and he missed out on 8 years with you. And I'm so sorry for that, Sinclair. I'm so sorry." Sinclair considered this quietly. "Are you going to make another bad decision? Are you going to push him away again?" The question hit Brielle like a punch to the gut. "No, baby, I'm not going to push him away." "Good. Because I like having a dad, and I think he makes you smile more than you have in a long time." Out of the mouths of babes, Brielle thought for the second time in as many days. That evening, true to his word, Coulson returned with enough Chinese food to feed a small army. He spread it out on Sinclair's hospital tray, and they ate together like a real family, chopsticks clicking, fortune cookies snapping, laughter filling the sterile hospital room. "What does your fortune say, Dad?" Sinclair asked, mouth full of lo mein. Coulson opened his fortune cookie and read, "The greatest risk is not taking one." He looked at Brielle as he said it, and the weight of those words hung between them. "That's a good one," Sinclair said, oblivious to the undercurrent. "Mine says, your smile will bring sunshine to someone's day." She beamed. "I like that. What's yours, Mommy?" Brielle cracked open her cookie and read silently. "The love you hide will find its way to the light." Her hands trembled slightly as she read it aloud. "That's perfect," Sinclair declared. "Because you and Dad are definitely hiding that you still love each other, but everyone can see it anyway." "Sinclair." Brielle's face flamed. "What?" "It's true. You keep looking at each other when you think the other person isn't watching. And you smile at the same time. And when Dad touches your hand by accident, you both get all weird and nervous." Coulson was fighting back a smile. "She's not wrong. Don't encourage her. I'm just saying." Sinclair settled back against her pillows with satisfaction. "You should probably just kiss and make up so we can all go home together and be a normal family." After Sinclair fell asleep, exhausted from the day's events, Coulson and Brielle found themselves alone in the dimly lit room, the only sound the soft beeping of monitors. "She's something else," Coulson said softly. "She gets that from you. The ability to cut straight through pretense to the truth." Coulson moved closer, his voice dropping. "Is she right about what you're hiding?" Brielle's heart hammered in her chest. "Coulson, we can't. It's too complicated." "Why?" Because 8 years ago we had a misunderstanding? Because you ran and I didn't chase hard enough? Because we're both so used to being alone that the thought of being together again terrifies us? Yes, to all of that. Coulson reached out and gently took her hand. I'm terrified too. Terrified that I'll mess this up again. Terrified that you'll disappear. Terrified that I'm feeling everything too fast and too intensely. But Brielle, I've spent 8 years without you, and they were the longest, loneliest years of my life. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. What are you saying? I'm saying that Dr. Winters told me I need to relocate to Portland. That Sinclair needs regular transfusions, possibly for years. I'm saying that I've already started making arrangements to move my company headquarters here, that I've been looking at houses in good school districts. That I'm all in, Brielle. For Sinclair. And for you. If you'll have me. Tears streamed down Brielle's face. You'd really do that? Uproot your entire life? My life has felt like I was just going through the motions for 8 years. You and Sinclair. You're not an uprooting. You're coming home. Before Brielle could respond, before she could overthink or second-guess or let fear win again, she kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them remembering how they fit together, then deeper. 8 years of longing pouring out between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Coulson rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, Brielle whispered. Even when I hated you, I loved you. So what happens now? Now we take it one day at a time. We focus on getting Sinclair healthy. We figure out how to be a family. We probably make mistakes and have arguments and screw things up. But we do it together, Coulson said. Together. They were interrupted by a small voice from the bed. Finally. Sinclair mumbled, her eyes still closed. I thought you two were never going to figure it out. Both parents laughed. How long have you been awake? Long enough to know that we're going to be okay. All of us. Sinclair opened her eyes. So, are we getting a house with a yard? Because I really want a dog. Over the next week, Sinclair's health improved dramatically. The regular transfusions from Coulson stabilized her platelet levels, bringing color back to her cheeks and energy back to her step. Dr. Winters cleared her to go home with strict instructions and a detailed care plan, but going home meant decisions. Logistics. Reality. You should both come stay at my place, Coulson said one evening as they discussed arrangements. I'm renting a furnished house in the Pearl District, 3 bedrooms, fully equipped. It makes sense while we figure out the long-term plan. Brielle hesitated. Coulson, that's moving pretty fast. Mommy, we're already a family, Sinclair pointed out with her usual directness. Families live together. Plus, Dad's place has a huge TV and he promised to teach me how to code. You're bribing my daughter with technology, Brielle accused, but she was smiling. Our daughter. Coulson corrected gently. And yes, absolutely I am. So Brielle found herself packing up the essentials from her small downtown apartment and moving into Coulson's rental house. It felt surreal, like stepping into a life that had been waiting for her all along. The first morning in the new house, Brielle woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes. She found Coulson in the kitchen, flour on his shirt, flipping pancakes while Sinclair sat at the counter directing his technique. Dad, you have to wait for the bubbles before you flip, Sinclair was saying with the authority of an expert. Otherwise, they get all weird and uneven. I thought uneven pancakes had character, Coulson protested. They have mistakes. That's different. Brielle leaned against the doorframe, watching them, her heart so full it hurt. This was what she'd denied them all. This easy morning routine, this comfortable banter, this sense of belonging. Coulson looked up and caught her watching. His smile was soft, intimate. Morning. Coffee's ready. As they sat down to breakfast together, Sinclair between them at the table, Brielle felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or hope, or just the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. But peace never lasts forever. Don't you think you should hit that subscribe button now? Because what you're about to hear next will prove that even when you think you've found your happy ending, life has other plans. And sometimes those plans will test everything you thought you knew about sacrifice and love. 3 weeks into their new routine, Dr. Winters called an emergency meeting. Brielle and Coulson sat in her office while Sinclair waited in the playroom, oblivious to the tension. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Dr. Winters said, her expression grave. "Sinclair's body is starting to develop antibodies against the transfused platelets. It's called alloimmunization. Her immune system is recognizing the foreign platelets and attacking them." "What does that mean?" Brielle felt ice flooding her veins. "It means the transfusions are becoming less effective. We're having to increase the frequency and volume to achieve the same results. And eventually, even that won't work." "How long?" Coulson's voice was steady, but his hand found Brielle's under the table, gripping tight. "Weeks. Maybe a few months if we're lucky." Dr. Winters pulled up a chart on her computer. "The good news is that there's a new experimental treatment, a gene therapy that could potentially correct the underlying platelet disorder. It's showing promising results in clinical trials." "What's the bad news?" Brielle asked. "Because there was always bad news. It's experimental. The success rate is about 60%. The side effects can be severe, and the treatment itself is grueling. 3 months of intensive therapy. Sinclair would need to be hospitalized for most of it. She'd be very sick. But if it works," Coulson said, "if it works, she'd be cured. No more transfusions, no more constant monitoring. She'd be a normal, healthy child." "And if it doesn't work?" Brielle asked. Dr. Winters met her eyes. "If it doesn't work, we'll have exhausted our options. We'd be looking at palliative care, making her comfortable for whatever time she has left." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Brielle felt the world tilting, felt Coulson's hand tightening on hers, felt 8 years of walls and defenses crumbling completely. "How long do we have to decide?" Coulson asked. 2 weeks, Dr. Winters said gently. "I know it's an impossible choice, but it's the only one we have." That night, after Sinclair had gone to bed, Brielle and Coulson sat on the back porch of the rental house, a bottle of wine between them, both too shattered to speak. Finally, Coulson broke the silence. "We have to do it. The gene therapy. It's her only chance. 60% success rate, Coulson. That's a coin flip. That's us gambling with our daughter's life. And if we don't do it, we're watching her die slowly." His voice broke. "I can't. Brielle, I just found her. I can't lose her." Brielle turned to him, seeing her own terror reflected in his eyes. "I'm so scared." "Me too." He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his shoulder, finally allowing herself to break down completely. They held each other in the darkness, two people who'd lost 8 years to fear and pride, now facing the possibility of losing everything that mattered. "What if we make the wrong choice?" Brielle whispered. "There is no right choice. There's only the choice we can live with. And I can't live with not trying." "Can you?" Brielle thought about Sinclair, her brilliant, brave, bossy daughter who'd brought them back together, who deserved a chance at a full life, who deserved parents willing to fight for her, no matter the odds. "No, I can't live with not trying either," they told Sinclair the next morning, sitting together on her bed, holding her hands. "So basically, this therapy might make me super sick, but if it works, I'll be all better?" Sinclair summarized with remarkable calm. "That's right," Coulson said. "But sweetheart, you need to understand how sick you might get. There will be days when you don't feel like doing anything. Days when you're in pain. Days when you're so tired you can barely stay awake. Will you both be there?" Sinclair asked. "The whole time?" "Every single day," Brielle promised. "Then I want to do it," Sinclair said with surprising certainty. "I don't want to spend my whole life getting transfusions and being careful and worrying about bleeding. I want to be normal. I want to play soccer and climb trees, and maybe get a scraped knee without it being a disaster." "You're so brave," Coulson said, his voice thick with emotion. "I get that from both of you," Sinclair said matter-of-factly. "Mommy was brave enough to have me all by herself, and Dad's brave enough to give me his blood even though it hurts. I can be brave enough to try to get better." The gene therapy began 2 weeks later, they moved Sinclair into a specialized isolation room at the hospital to minimize infection risk. The first round of treatment was brutal. Sinclair developed a high fever, nausea so severe she couldn't keep anything down, and pain that made her small body curl in on itself. Brielle and Coulson took shifts staying with her, one always by her bedside, the other catching a few hours of sleep in the family room before switching. They read to her when she was awake, held her hand when she was sleeping, whispered encouragement when she was suffering. Make it stop. Sinclair whimpered one night, her voice hoarse from vomiting. Mommy, please make it stop. Brielle felt her heart shatter. I can't, baby. I'm so sorry. I can't. Coulson appeared in the doorway, take-out coffee in hand, relief at shift change written on his exhausted face. He took one look at Sinclair's condition and immediately moved to the other side of the bed. Hey, sweetheart, I'm here. Dad's here. It hurts. Sinclair's tears cut tracks down her pale cheeks. I know it does. But you're doing so good. You're so strong. Coulson looked at Brielle over their daughter's head, and she saw her own anguish reflected there. We're going to get through this. All of us together. Promise? Sinclair asked. Promise. By week 6 of the treatment, Sinclair had lost weight, her hair had started falling out, and her spirit seemed dimmed. The vibrant, curious child had been replaced by a pale, quiet shadow. Brielle watched her daughter deteriorate and questioned everything. What if we made the wrong choice? She asked Coulson one night in the family waiting room. What if we're torturing her for nothing? We made the choice we had to make, Coulson said, but she could hear the doubt in his voice too. We're giving her a chance. At what cost? Before Coulson could answer, Dr. Winters appeared, her expression unreadable. We need to talk. The preliminary scans are back. Brielle felt her heart stop. And? Dr. Winters smiled, and it was the first time Brielle had seen genuine joy on the doctor's face. It's working. Her platelet production is increasing. The genetic markers are correcting. Sinclair's body is responding to the treatment. Brielle's legs gave out. Coulson caught her, holding her up as sobs racked her body. She's going to be okay? If this trajectory continues, yes, she's going to be okay. We'll need to complete the full course of treatment, and there's still recovery ahead, but the hardest part is over. Your daughter is going to survive. Coulson pulled Brielle close, and they stood there in the corridor, clinging to each other, crying with relief and joy, and the release of weeks of unbearable tension. When they told Sinclair, she managed a weak smile. Told you I was brave. The bravest. Brielle kissed her forehead. The absolute bravest. Over the next 6 weeks, they watched Sinclair slowly come back to life. Color returned to her cheeks. Her appetite came back. Her hair started growing in, darker and curlier than before. And most importantly, her spirit returned, that indomitable spark that made her Sinclair. The day Dr. Winters declared the treatment successful and cleared Sinclair to go home, the entire hospital staff gathered to celebrate. Nurses who'd cared for her brought balloons. Technicians who'd run her tests brought stuffed animals. Dr. Winters brought a certificate declaring Sinclair the bravest patient she'd ever treated. I couldn't have done it without my parents, Sinclair said, standing between Brielle and Coulson, holding both their hands. They taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. As they walked out of the hospital together, Sinclair between them, Brielle felt Coulson's hand find hers. We made it. We made it, she agreed. But their journey wasn't over yet. That evening, after they'd settled Sinclair at home, tucked her into her own bed for the first time in months, Coulson found Brielle on the back porch, staring up at the stars. You okay? He asked, settling beside her. I'm processing. We almost lost her, Coulson. We came so close, but we didn't. She's here. She's healthy. She's going to have a normal life. Brielle turned to face him. What about us? What happens to us now? Coulson reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box he'd been carrying for 8 years. I've been waiting for the right moment to ask you this. I thought maybe it would be perfect and romantic, with candles and music and a grand gesture. But then I realized our story has never been perfect. It's been messy and complicated and full of misunderstandings, but it's also been real, and I don't want perfect. I just want you." He opened the box, revealing the sapphire ring that had waited so long. "Brielle Hartley, will you marry me? Not because it makes sense, or because we share a daughter, or because we've been through hell together, but because I love you. Because I've loved you for 8 years, even when you weren't here. Because I want to spend the rest of my life making up for lost time and building new memories and showing Sinclair what real love looks like." Brielle's eyes filled with tears. "You're right. Our story has never been perfect. I ran when I should have stayed. I hid when I should have been honest. I let pride and fear cost us 8 years we can never get back. Brielle, but you know what?" She smiled through her tears. "Maybe our imperfect story is exactly what makes it beautiful. Maybe we needed to lose each other to understand how much we belonged together. Maybe Sinclair's illness, as terrible as it was the universe giving us a second chance we didn't deserve but needed anyway. Is that a yes?" "That's a yes. 1,000 times yes." Coulson slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting there all along. Then he kissed her, and it felt like coming home, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, like everything they'd been through had led them to exactly this moment. They were interrupted by applause from the doorway. Sinclair stood there in her pajamas, grinning. "Finally. I was starting to think I'd have to plan the whole proposal myself." "How long have you been standing there?" Brielle demanded. "Long enough." Sinclair bounced over and inserted herself between them. "So, when's the wedding? And can I be the flower girl? And are we getting a dog now because you promised?" "One thing at a time." Coulson laughed, pulling both his girls close. As they sat there together, the three of them, watching the stars come out over Portland, Brielle felt something she hadn't felt in 8 years. Complete, whole, home. Her daughter had needed blood, and that need had brought the billionaire who broke her heart back into her life. But somewhere along the way, between the hospital corridors and the transfusion rooms and the terrifying waiting periods, they'd built something new. Not a recreation of what they'd lost, but something stronger. Something tested. Something that had survived the worst and come out beautiful. 6 months later, they stood in a small garden ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Sinclair, fully healthy and radiantly happy, served as both flower girl and ring bearer, insisting she could handle both responsibilities. "Do you, Brielle Hartley, take this man," the officiant began. "I do." Brielle interrupted, looking at Coulson with eyes full of love. "I absolutely do." The officiant smiled. "I haven't finished the question yet." "Doesn't matter." Coulson grinned. "I would have interrupted too." When they finally sealed their vows with a kiss, Sinclair cheered louder than anyone. "That's my parents," she announced to everyone. They took forever to figure it out, but they got there eventually. Later, at the reception, Dr. Winters approached them. "I have to say, in all my years of practicing medicine, I've never seen a case quite like yours. The medical complications that brought you together, the experimental treatment that saved her life, the love story that emerged from tragedy. It's remarkable. Life has a funny way of working out," Coulson said, his arm around Brielle's waist. "Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things," Brielle added. "If you'd asked me a year ago if I'd ever speak to Coulson again, I would have said never. But here we are. Here we are," Coulson echoed and kissed her softly. As the evening wore on, Brielle found herself standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching Coulson teach Sinclair how to waltz, both of them laughing as they stepped on each other's toes. "Happy?" a voice asked. It was Coulson's brother Dashiell, who'd flown in for the wedding. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Brielle admitted. "You know, Coulson never stopped talking about you. All those years you were gone, he'd find ways to bring you up in conversation. The woman who got away, we all thought he was being dramatic, holding on to something that was over. But seeing you two together now, I get it. Some people are just meant to find their way back to each other. Even if it takes 8 years and a life-threatening illness? Especially then." Dashiell smiled. "The easy love stories are nice, but the ones that require you to fight, to sacrifice, to become better people, those are the ones that last." As the night drew to a close and guests began to depart, the three of them, Brielle, Coulson, and Sinclair, found themselves alone in the garden where they'd exchanged vows. "Best day ever," Sinclair declared, twirling in her flower girl dress. "I thought the best day ever was when you got to leave the hospital," Coulson teased. "That was the best medical day ever. This is the best family day ever. There's a difference. She's got a point." Brielle laughed. Sinclair grew serious for a moment. "Can I say something?" "Of course, sweetheart. I know my being sick was really scary and awful, and I know you both wish it had never happened, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm kind of glad it did, because it brought us together. It gave me a dad and gave you back each other. And yeah, I had to go through a lot of horrible stuff, but I got a family out of it, a real family. So maybe it was worth it." Brielle knelt down to look her daughter in the eye. "Sinclair, you listen to me. You were always worth it. Every moment of fear, every impossible choice, every sleepless night, you were always worth it. And I'm sorry it took your illness for me to be brave enough to give you the father you deserved. And I'm sorry I missed 8 years of your life," Coulson added, kneeling beside Brielle. "But I promise you, I'm going to make the most of every day we have from now on. I know you will." Sinclair threw her arms around both of them. "Because we're a family, and families don't give up on each other." As they held each other in the garden, under the stars that had witnessed their vows, Brielle thought about the journey that had brought them here, the heartbreak that had driven them apart, the pride that had kept them separated, the crisis that had forced them back together, the love that had never really died, just waited patiently for its moment to bloom again. Her daughter had needed blood, and that need had changed everything. But in the end, it wasn't the blood that had saved them. It was forgiveness. It was courage. It was the willingness to be vulnerable, to admit mistakes, to choose love over fear. And that, Brielle thought as she looked at her husband and daughter, was the real miracle. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in second chances and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to make things right, that pride is never worth more than love, that sometimes our biggest mistakes lead us to our greatest blessings. Subscribe to Cedar Drama for more stories that will challenge you, move you, and remind you that life's most beautiful moments often come from its darkest hours. Comment below and tell me, what would you sacrifice for the people you love? What second chance have you been too afraid to take? What pride are you holding onto that might be costing you everything? Rate this story from 0 to 100, not for me, but for yourself. Let that number reflect how much you believe that broken things can be made whole again. That love can survive anything if you're willing to fight for it. That family isn't just about biology, it's about choice, about showing up, about being brave enough to try again. Remember, the people who hurt us most are sometimes the ones holding the key to our greatest healing. Second chances don't come with guarantees, but they do come with possibilities. And sometimes, just sometimes, those possibilities are worth more than all the certainty in the world. Thank you for being part of the Cedar Drama family. Your presence here, your willingness to feel deeply and believe boldly, that's what makes these stories matter. Until next time, choose courage over comfort. Choose forgiveness over bitterness. Choose the love that scares you, because that's the love that will transform you. This is Cedar Drama, reminding you that your story isn't over. The best chapters might still be waiting to be written.